All right, it's time for book 2 in the Chronicles of Prydain, the Black Cauldron. Might be able to tell that this cover is way different than the last one. That's because Disney picked this one up for a movie, you know, a long time ago. Chapter 1, The Council at Caer Dallben. Autumn had come too swiftly. In the northernmost realms of Prydain, many trees were already leafless, and among the branches clung the ragged shapes of empty nests. To the south, across the great river Avron, the hills shielded Caer Dallben from the winds, but even here the little farm was drawing in on itself. For Taran, the summer was ending before it had begun. That morning Dallben had given him the task of washing the oracular pig. Had the old enchanter ordered him to capture a full-grown Gwythaint, Taran would gladly have set out after one of the vicious winged creatures. As it was, he filled the bucket at the well and trudged reluctantly to Henwen's enclosure. The white pig, usually eager for a bath, now squealed nervously and rolled on her back in the mud. Busy struggling to raise Henwen to her feet, Taran did not notice the horseman until he had reined up the pen. "You there, pig boy!" The rider, looking down at him, was in youth only a few years older than Taran. His hair was tawny, his eyes black and deep-set, and a pale, arrogant face. Though of excellent quality, his garments had seen much wear, and his cloak was purposefully draped to hide his threadbare attire. The cloak itself, Taran saw, had been neatly and painstakingly mended. He sat astride a roan mare, a lean and nervous steed, speckled red and yellow, with a long, narrow head, whose expression was ill-tempered as her master's. Let me change my voice, though. "You, pig boy," he repeated. "Is this Caer Dallben?" The horseman's tone and bearing nettled Taran, but he curbed his temper and bowed courteously. "It is," he replied. "But I am not a pig boy," he added. "I am Taran, assistant pig keeper." "A pig is a pig," said the stranger, "and a pig boy is a pig boy. Run and tell your master I am here," he ordered. "Tell him that Prince Eladir, son of Penlarceau—" Henwen seized this opportunity to roll into another puddle. "Stop that hen!" Taran cried, hurrying after her. "Leave off with that now," Eladir commanded. "Did you not hear me? Do as I say and be quick about it." "Tell Dallben yourself," Taran called over his shoulder, trying to keep Henwen from the mud. "Or wait until I've done with my own work." "Mind your impudence," Eladir answered, "or you shall have a good beating for it." Taran flushed, leaving Henwen to do as she pleased. He strode quickly to the railing and climbed over. "If I do," he answered hotly, throwing back his head and looking Eladir full in the face, "it will not be at your hands." Eladir gave a scornful laugh. Before Taran could spring aside, the roan plunged forward. Eladir, leaning from the saddle, seized Taran by the front of the jacket. Taran flailed his arms and legs vainly. Strong as he was, he could not break free. He was pummeled and shaken until his teeth rattled. Eladir then urged the roan into a gallop, hauled Taran across the turf to the cottage, and there, while chickens scattered in every direction, tossed him roughly to the ground. The commotion brought Dallben and Cole outdoors. The Princess Islandby hurried from the scullery, her apron flying and a cookpot still in her hand. With a cry of alarm, she ran to Taran's side. Eladir, without troubling to dismount, called to the white-bearded enchanter. "Dallben, I've brought your pig boy to be thrashed for his insolence." "Tut," said Dallben, unperturbed by Eladir's furious expression. "Whether he is insolent is one thing, and whether he should be thrashed is another. In either case, I need no suggestions from you." "I am a prince of Penlarceau!" cried Eladir. Yes, Dallben interrupted with a wave of his brittle hand. "I am quite aware of all that and too busy to be concerned with it. Go, water your horse and your temper at the same time. You shall be called when you are wanted." Eladir was about to reply, but the enchanter's stern glance made him hold his tongue. He turned the roan and urged her toward the stable. Princess Islandby and the stout, bald-headed Cole, meantime, had been helping Taran pick himself up. "You should know better, my boy, than to quarrel with strangers," said Cole good-naturedly. "That's true enough," Islandby added, "especially if they're on horseback and you're on foot." "Next time I meet him," Taran began. When you meet again, said Dalbin, you at least shall conduct yourself with as much restraint and dignity as possible, which I allow may not be very great, but you shall have to make do with it. Be off now. The Princess Island, we can help you to be a little more presentable than you are at the moment. In the lowest of spirits, Taran followed the golden-haired girl to the scullery. He still smarted, more from Elidir's words than from the drubbing, and he was hardly pleased that Islandme had seen him sprawled at the feet of the arrogant prince. However did it happen? Islandme asked, picking up a damp cloth and applying it to Taran's face. Taran did not answer, but glumly submitted to her care. Before Islandme had finished, a hairy figure, covered in leaves and twigs, popped up at the window, and with great agility clambered over the sill. "Woe and sadness!" the creature wailed, loping anxiously to Taran. "Gurgi sees smackings and whackings by strengthful lord. Poor, kindly master, Gurgi is sorry for him." "But there is news," Gurgi hurried on. "Good news. Gurgi also sees the mightiest of princes riding. Yes, with great gallopings on a white horse with black sword. What joy!" "What's that?" cried Taran. "You mean Prince Gwydion? Can't be." "It is," said a voice behind him. Gwydion stood in the doorway. With a shout of amazement, Taran ran forward and clasped his hand. Islandme threw her arms around the tall warrior, while Gurgi joyfully pounded the floor. The last time Taran had seen him, Gwydion wore the raiment of a prince of the royal house of Dawn. Now he was dressed simply in a hooded cloak of grey and a coarse, unadorned jacket. The black sword Dernwyn hung at his side. "Well met, all of you," said Gwydion. "Gurgi looks hungry as ever, Islandme prettier than ever, and you, assistant pig-keeper," he added, his lined and weathered face breaking into a smile, "a little the worse for wear. Dalbin has mentioned how you came by those bruises." "I sought no quarrel," Taran declared, "but one found you nonetheless," Gwydion said. "I think that must be the way of it with you, Taran of Caer Dalbin." "No matter," he said, stepping back and studying Taran closely through gleam-flecked eyes. "Let me look at you. You have grown since last we met." Gwydion nodded and his shaggy wolf-gray head in approval. "I hope you have gained as much wisdom as height. We shall see. Now I must make ready for the council." "Council?" Taran cried. "Dalbin said nothing of a council. He did not even say you were coming here." "The truth is," Islandme put in, "Dalbin hasn't been saying much of anything to anybody." "You should understand by now," said Gwydion, "that of what he knows, Dalbin tells little. Yes, there is to be a council, and I have summoned others to meet us here." "I am old enough to sit in a council of men," Taran interrupted excitedly. "I have learned much. I have fought at your side. I have—" Gently, Gwydion said. "We have agreed you shall have a place. Though manhood," he added softly with a trace of sadness, "may not be all that you believe." Gwydion put his hands on Taran's shoulders. "Meanwhile, stand ready. Your task will be given soon enough." As Gwydion had foretold, the rest of the morning brought many new arrivals. A company of horsemen soon appeared and began to make camp in a stubble field beyond the orchard. The warriors, Taran saw, were armed for battle. His heart leaped. Surely this too had to do with Gwydion's counsel. His head spun with questions, and he hurried toward the field. He had not gone halfway when he stopped short in great surprise. Two familiar figures were riding up the pathway. Taran raced to greet them. "Fluter!" he called, while the bard, his beautiful harp slung over his shoulder, raised a hand in greeting. "And Dolly, is that really you?" The crimson-haired dwarf sprung down from his pony. He grinned broadly for an instant, then assumed his customary scowl. He did not, however, conceal the glint of pleasure in his round red eyes. "Dolly," Taran clasped the dwarf on the back, "I never thought I'd see you again. That is, really see you, not after you gained the power to be invisible." "Humph," snorted the leather-jacketed dwarf. "Invisible. I've had all I want of that. Do you realize the effort it takes? Terrible. It makes my ears ring. And that's not the worst of it. Nobody can see you, so you get your toes stepped on or an elbow jabbed in your eye. No, not for me. I can't stand it anymore." "And you, Fluter," Taran cried as the bard dismounted. "I've missed you. Do you know what the council is about? That's why you're here, isn't it? And Dolly, too?" "I know nothing about councils," muttered Dolly. "King Edeling commanded me to come here, a special favor to Gwydion. But I can tell you right now, I'd rather be back home in the realm of the fair folk, minding my own business." In my case, said the bard, Gwydion happened to be passing through my kingdom purely by chance, it seemed, though now I'm beginning to think it wasn't. He suggested I might enjoy stopping down at Caerdalban. He said good old Dolly was going to be there, so of course I set out immediately. I've given up being a bard, Fluter continued, and had settled quite happily as a king again. Really, it was only to oblige Gwydion. At this, 2 strings of his harp snapped with a resounding twang. Fluter stopped immediately and cleared his throat. Yes, well, he added, the truth of it is I was perfectly miserable. I have taken any excuse to get out of that damp, dismal castle for a while. A council, you say? I was hoping it might be a harvest festival and I'd be needed to provide the entertainment. Whatever it is, Taryn said, I'm glad you're both here. I'm not, grumbled the dwarf. When they start talking about good old Dolly this and good old Dolly that, watch out. It's for something disagreeable. As they made their way to the cottage, Fluter looked around with interest. Well, well, do I see King Smolt's banner over there? He's here at Gwydion's request, too, I've no doubt. Just then a horseman cantered up and called to Fluter by name. The bard gave a cry of pleasure. That's a Dion, son of the chief bard Tellison, he told Taryn. Caerdalban is indeed honored today. The rider dismounted and Fluter hastened to present his companions to him. Adian, Taryn saw, was tall, with straight black hair that fell to his shoulders. Though of noble bearing, he wore the garb of an ordinary warrior, with no ornament save his curiously shaped iron brooch at his collar. His eyes were gray, strangely deep, clear as a flame, and Taryn sensed that little was hidden from Adian's thoughtful and searching gaze. Well met, Taryn of Caerdalban, and Dolly of the Fair Folk, said Adian, clasping their hands in turn. Your names are not unknown among the bards of the north. Then you two are a bard? Asked Taryn, bowing with great respect. Adian smiled and shook his head. Many times my father has asked me to present myself for initiation, but I chose to wait. There is still much I hope to learn, and in my own heart I do not feel myself ready. One day, perhaps, I will be. Adian turned to Fluter. My father sends greeting and asks how you fare with the harp he gave you. I can see it wants repair, he added with a friendly laugh. Yes, admitted Fluter, I do have trouble with it now and then. I can't help adding a little color to the facts. Most facts need it so badly. But every time I do, he sighed, looking at the 2 broken strings, this is the result. Be of good cheer, said Adian, laughing wholeheartedly. Your gallant tales are worth all the harp strings in Prydain. And you, Taryn and Dolly, must promise to tell me more of your famous deeds. But first I must find Lord Gwydion. Taking leave of the companions, Adian mounted and rode on ahead. Fluter looked after him with affection and admiration. It can be no small matter if Adian is here, he said. He is one of the bravest men I know. That and more, for he has the heart of a true bard. Some day he will surely be our greatest. You can mark my words. And our names are indeed known to him? Taryn asked. And there have been songs about us? Fluter beamed. After our battle with the Horned King, yes, I did compose a little something, a modest offering, but it's gratifying to know it has spread. As soon as I fix these wretched strings, I'll be delighted to let you hear it. Soon after midday, when all had refreshed themselves, Cole summoned them to Dalban's chamber. There, a long table had been placed, with seats on either side. Tara noticed the enchanter had even made some attempt at straightening up the disorder of ancient volumes crowding the room. The Book of Three, the heavy tome filled with Dalban's deepest secrets, had been set carefully at the top of a shelf. Taryn glanced up at it almost fearfully, sure that it had held far more than Dalban ever chose to reveal. The rest of the company had begun to enter when Fluter took Taryn's arm and drew him aside as a dark-bearded warrior swept by. One thing you can be sure of, the bard said under his breath, Gwydion isn't planning a harvest festival. Do you see who's here? The dark warrior was more richly attired than any of the company. His high-bridged nose was falcon-like, his eyes heavy-lidded but keen. Only to Gwydion did he bow. Then, taking a seat at the table, he cast a cool glance of appraisal at those around him. Who is he? Whispered Taryn, not daring to stare at the proud and regal figure. King Mordant of Maddock, answered the bard, the boldest war leader in all Prydain, second only to Gwydion himself. He owes allegiance to House of Dawn. He shook his head in admiration. They say he once saved Gwydion's life. I believe it. I've seen that fellow in battle, all ice, absolutely fearless. If Morgans have a hand in this, something interesting must be stirring. Oh, listen, it's King Smoit. You can always hear him before you can see him. A bellow of laughter resounded beyond the chamber, and in another moment a giant red-bearded warrior rolled in at the side of Adian. He towered above all in the chamber, and his beard flamed around a face so scarred with old wounds it was impossible to tell where one began and another ended. His nose had been battered to his cheekbones. His heavy forehead was nearly lost in a fierce tangle of eyebrows, and his neck seemed as thick as Terran's waist. "What a bear!" said Fluter with an affectionate chuckle. "But there's not a grain of harm in him. When the lords of the southern cantons rose against the sons of Dawn, Smoit was one of the few who stayed loyal. His kingdom is Cafador." Smoit stopped in the middle of the chamber, threw back his cloak, and hooked his thumbs into his enormous bronze belt, which strained to burst about his middle. "Hello, Morgant!" he roared. "So they've called you in, have they?" He sniffed ferociously. "I smell bloodletting in the wind." He strode up to the stern war leader and fetched him a heavy clout on the shoulder. "Have a care," said Morgant with a lean smile that showed only the tips of his teeth, "that it will not be yours." I'm trying to do a Snape there, but I suck at Snape. Rip Alan Rickman. "Oh, ho, ho, ho!" King Smoit bellowed and slapped his massive thighs. "Very good. Have a care, it will not be mine. Never fear, you icicle. I have enough to spare." He caught sight of Fluter. "And another old comrade!" he roared, hurrying to the bard and flinging his arms about him with such enthusiasm that Terran heard Fluter's ribs creak. "My pulse!" cried Smoit. "My body and bones! Give us a tune to make us merry, you butter-headed harp-scraper!" His eye fell on Terran. "What's this? What's this?" He seized Terran with a mighty red-furred hand. "A skinned rabbit? A plucked chicken?" "He is Terran, Dalbin's assistant pig-keeper," said the bard. "I wish he was Dalbin's cook," cried Smoit. "I've hardly lined my belly." Dalbin began to rap for silence. Smoit strode to his place after giving Fluter another hug. "There may not be any harm in him," said Terran to the bard, "but I think it's safer to have him for a friend." All the company now gathered at the table, with Dalbin and Gwydion at one end, Cole at the other. King Smoit, overflowing his chair, sat on the enchanter's left across from King Morgant. Terran squeezed in between the bard and Dolly, who grumbled bitterly about the table being too high. To the right of Morgant sat Adion, and beside him Eladir, whom Terran had not seen since morning. Dalbin rose and stood quietly a moment. All turned toward him. The enchanter pulled on a wisp of beard. "I am much too old to be polite," Dalbin said, "and I have no intention of making a speech of welcome. Our business here is urgent. We shall get down to it immediately. Little more than a year ago, as some of you have good cause to remember," Dalbin went on, glancing at Terran and his companions, "Aeron, Lord of Anuvin, suffered grave defeat when the Horned King, his champion, was slain. For a time the power of the Land of Death was checked, but in Prydain, evil is never distant. None of us is foolish enough to believe Aeron would accept defeat without challenge," Dalbin continued. "I had hoped for a little more time to ponder the new threat of Anuvin. Time, alas, will not be granted. Aeron's plans have become all too clear. Of them I ask Lord Gwydion to speak." Gwydion rose in turn. His face was grave. "Who has not heard of the Cauldron-born, the mute and deathless warriors who serve the Lord of Anuvin? These are the stolen bodies of the slain, steeped in Aeron's cauldron to give them life again. They emerge implacable as death itself, their humanity forgotten. Indeed, they are no longer men, but weapons of murder, enthralled to Aeron forever. In this loathsome work," Gwydion went on, "Aeron has sought to despoil the graves and barrows of fallen warriors. Now, throughout Prydain, there have been strange disappearances, men suddenly vanishing to be seen no more, and Cauldron-born appear where none has ever been sighted. Aeron has not been idle. As I have now learned, his servants dare to strike down the living and bear them to Anuvin to swell the ranks of his deathless host. Thus death begets death, evil begets evil." Terran shuddered. Outdoors the forest burned crimson and yellow. The air was gentle, as though a summer's day had lingered beyond its season, but Gwydion's words chilled him like a sudden cold wind. Too well he remembered the lifeless eyes and livid faces of the Cauldron-born, their ghastly silence and ruthless swords. "To the meat of it!" cried Smoit. "Are we rabbits? Are we to fear these cauldron slaves?" "There will be meat enough for you to chew on," answered Gwydion with a grim smile. I tell you now, none of us has ever set on a more perilous task. I ask your help, for I mean to attack Anuvin itself and seize Aeron's cauldron and destroy it.